Long ago, on the rocky coast of Maine, where the Atlantic Ocean whispered softly against the cliffs, stood a lonely lighthouse called Brimstone Point Light. It wasn't famous, and few people ever visited, but for more than 40 years, one quiet man kept its lantern shining. His name was Samuel Harper. The townspeople knew him simply as Mr. Harper. He was a gentleman with silver hair, kind eyes, and a calm voice that sounded like the waves themselves. Every morning before sunrise, Samuel climbed the narrow spiral stairs to the top of the lighthouse. He cleaned the great glass windows and polished the brass lamp until it gleamed like gold. He lived alone in a small white cottage beside the sea. His days were peaceful. He tended a little vegetable garden, baked fresh bread, and read old books while seagulls circled above the harbor. At night, when the fog rolled in from the ocean, Samuel would light the beacon. The bright light slowly turned, guiding fishermen and sailors safely through the darkness. The people in nearby villages often said that seeing the lighthouse beam gave them comfort. Even on the coldest nights, they knew someone was awake, watching over the sea. Samuel never married, and he never asked for recognition. He simply believed that every person had a purpose, and his purpose was to keep the light burning. As the years passed, new technologies arrived. Modern ships no longer depended on lighthouses as they once had. One autumn morning, a letter arrived from the government. It announced that Brimstone Point Light would become automated. Samuel read the letter quietly. He folded it neatly and placed it on his kitchen table. Though sadness touched his heart, he understood that times were changing. For several more weeks, he carried out his duties with the same care he had shown for decades. Every evening, he lit the beacon, listening to the waves and the cries of distant gulls. On his final night as keeper, a thick fog covered the sea. Samuel climbed the stairs slowly and stood beside the great lamp. He smiled softly as the light rotated across the dark water one last time under his care. Then something unexpected happened. As midnight approached, small lights began appearing on the shoreline. Fishermen from nearby towns had gathered with lanterns in their boats. Families stood on the cliffs holding candles. One by one, they raised their lights towards the lighthouse. Samuel looked out through the glass and saw hundreds of tiny glowing lights twinkling below. He removed his cap and wiped away a tear. The people had come to thank the man who had quietly watched over them for so many years. The next morning, Samuel packed his belongings into 2 old suitcases. Before leaving, he locked the cottage door and turned for one last look at Brimstone Point Light. The ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and pine trees. The gulls cried overhead, just as they always had. Samuel smiled. He moved to a small village farther inland, where he spent his days writing journals and teaching children about the sea. Sometimes he would sit on his porch in the evening and watch the sunset paint the sky with shades of orange and pink. Years later, travelers visiting the coast of Maine often heard stories about the forgotten lighthouse keeper. Old fishermen would point towards Brimstone Point Light and say softly, "There was once a man named Samuel Harper. He never sought fame or fortune, but for 40 years, while the world slept, he kept the light shining." And though his footsteps had faded from the lighthouse stairs, many believed that kindness, dedication, and quiet purpose leave a light that never truly goes out. As the waves continued their endless song against the Maine coast, the old lighthouse stood peacefully beneath the stars, remembering the man who had cared for it so faithfully. And somewhere, carried gently by the ocean breeze, the memory of Samuel Harper still shone like a small, steady light in the darkness. The end. Moonlight Stars.